Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the September 25th Diversion Authority Finance Committee meeting. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Here.
Mayor Mahoney. Mayor Carlson.
Here.
Mr. Steen. Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Here.
Mr. Peterson is on the bus. Mr. Reitz. Ms. Madriga. And I know Brandy will be out. We do not have a quorum right now.
I'm going to ask the committee what you'd like us to, how would you should proceed? Obviously, we can't take any actionable items.
Mr. Chair, I would maybe suggest we just moved under the regular agenda and get the updates. There's a number of updates that could be given, and hopefully...
On which items specifically? Would you call out the numbers, please, Mayor?
Yep. 5A, 5B.
This is the finance.
Oh.
You're still working on the other.
Yep, sorry, wrong agenda. So we could do number 6.
Co-executive directors, do you agree with that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe to Mayor Carlson's point, we probably could take up.
Mayor Mahoney is just entering. How short are we on a quorum?
No, she went to print some.
I'm sorry?
No, there was one person that was on.
Don, we've had two join us. Are we still short?
We have a quorum with Mayor Mahoney.
And here comes Chad Peterson, too. Commissioner Peterson.
Madam Secretary, could I ask you to please call the roll again? I'm sorry about this.
Mayor Dardis.
Here.
Mayor Mahoney.
Here.
Mayor Carlson.
Here.
Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
I am here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you, Don. Item number 2 is to approve the minutes of the August 21st, 2024. That is in your packet, has been distributed, and it's on page 3.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of August 21st, 2024 as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on. Item number 3 is to approve the order of the agenda. It is before you.
So move.
Okay. I have a motion by Mayor Mahoney. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Susan Thompson. We have, is there any discussion? The motion to approve the agenda as distributed. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item number 4. We're going to ask on Susan Thompson, Finance Director of the City of Fargo, for the approval of bills.
The bill list is on page 6. Bills are through September 18th. They total $8.8 million. The top, the big 3, Cass County Joint Water Resources District is several land purchases. The City of Fargo includes various projects. The biggest ones are the South University wall repair that we talked about at previous meetings, and also some storm lift rehabs. And then Clay County, there was a flowage easement that was the big item on that. Any questions on any of the bills?
Any questions? Anyone? This is an actionable item.
Move to approve.
Mayor Carlson moves to approve. Is there a second?
I will second.
City Administrator Mike Redlinger seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the approval of the bills? Hearing none, Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
yes,
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Item number 5 is the finance report. Again, we call on Susan Thompson for that. It has been distributed. It's on page 36. Ms. Thompson.
So, yes, page 36 is the historic and year-to-date 24 revenue and expenditure statement. And then on page 37 is the statement of net position as far as assets, both the diversion project fund and the budget fund. The total is $285,125,178. Liabilities are at $78,851. So the total net position is $285,046,327. Any questions?
Any questions? Any questions on the finance report? This is an actionable item. A motion, please.
Move to approve.
Mayor Carlson moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Steen seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the finance report as distributed and as presented by Ms. Thompson. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 6 is the cash budget report. We'll call on Mr. Paul Barthol. It's on page 59 of the packet. It has been distributed.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Our annual revenue status, you'll see there that we are continuing to bring in significant sales tax, almost above the $7 million mark for the month of, that came in last month. And then we also had a $20 million legacy fund draw that hit the books last month. So it was a very good month that way, with over $31 million of income last month. So our fiscal year to date is over 127, almost $128 million. Our expenditures, things are still running as planned, or actually a bit below our planned expenditures. We've only expended $96 million out of the $216 million to date, and that is through the end of August, so 8 months out of the year expended, so we're tracking below. However, as we get into level 2, we'll hit some further detail on that, and I do expect some more expenses to come through. The first one we're going to touch on is the River Stage 37 projects. You notice from your bills listing, there is about $3 million that came in from the city of Fargo. They are wrapping up several of their projects yet this year. And so I anticipate the majority of their work will be finished yet this year. I don't know if we'll get to that $20 million mark, but I do expect another $7 to $10 million coming in from the city of Fargo by the end of the year. The other one is on the lands and mitigation. We have about $12 million left in that budget, and that is going to be tight. There's some large properties and some settlements that are going to be closing out before the end of the year. Hopefully we can get those closed out before the end of the year. It's all going to be very close as to whether they hit the 2024 hit in December of 2024 or January of 2025. So that's one area that we are keeping an eye on. The rest of those, there's a potential for the milestone payments to the developer. So if we can get to interim completion on several elements, we may see that. If not, those will get pushed to the right, as you'll see potentially in the cash budget for 2025. Since we don't pay them in 2024, we'll probably more than likely pay them in 2025. So, and then the other side, things on the management and engineering are tracking as planned. And so I don't have anything really to comment on those areas. And then if you go on to the last slide, same with the next slide, Peggy. If we go on to the operations budget, that is the salary and benefits of staff. Again, those are all tracking well. Should be in below budget at the end of this year. So any questions that way?
Any questions for Paul? Anyone?
Thank you.
Thank you. That's an informational item only. We're going to move on to item number 7 of MOUs and agreements. We're going to call on Mr. Shockley. There's 2 items to consider, the Clay County 37-foot MOU and the North Pleasant Cemetery Agreement. Mr. Shockley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. You may recall the first item, previously seen this MOU on the agenda. I believe it was tabled previously. This is a MOU with Clay County for road raises for 37-foot improvements within Clay County. Attached to one of the exhibits within the document itself shows the different road raises and associated infrastructure that are required to occur within Clay County pursuant to the MOU. Has very similar terms to the MOU between the authority and Cass County. And so it is being presented to the Finance Committee and then subsequently to the board for approval.
Thank you. How does the committee feel? Do we want to act on these separately or together? Mr. Pipcorn.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So obviously this is in Minnesota. So then are we using North Dakota money to pay for this Minnesota project? And I guess my other continuation of that question is, are we tracking that to make sure that Minnesota pays for their part of it?
Actually, Chair.
Actually, this is for John Shockley, not for you.
Well, then I will respond after Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Pepcorn, a couple of things. So my understanding is, first of all, that the costs, and I would have to defer to the PMC, but the costs are being tracked for all project expenditures, whether in Minnesota, Fargo, or in Cass County or Clay County. So those costs are being tracked. Second, with respect to the contribution of Minnesota that is set forth in the Joint Powers Agreement between the member entities, in the Joint Powers Agreement, it provides what the Minnesota entity's contribution is, and that is approximately $100 million indexed for inflation. I haven't done the exact calculations what that means, but in today's dollars, but over time, Moorhead and Minnesota have contributed, I think, well over $100 million to the infrastructure on the Minnesota side. Very similar to Fargo having contributed with its in-town flood protection, which is integral to the project. It's also my understanding that there's been discussion about the political process and procedure to seek additional funds from the state of Minnesota through the legislature. That was previously requested this last session. My understanding, and I think it was indicated earlier today by Councilmember Hendrickson at the meeting with the North Dakota governor, that money had been asked for, but there was no bonding bill in Minnesota. And so the intent is that enter into this MOU and then Clay County and Moorhead with assistance from the authority are going to go back down and ask for some additional money from the state of Minnesota above and beyond what their commitment is in the JPA.
Chair Dodges.
Mayor, please.
Thank you. Just to provide additional specificity in regards to what Attorney Shockley has stated, the JPA does state that the Minnesota share shall not exceed $100 million in 2015 dollars. It's been calculated to be about $132 million in 2024 dollars. Between the amount of funding that has been contributed by the state of Minnesota and the city of Moorhead, that amount has totaled $160 million. So actually there's $28 million that's been over contributed by between the state of Minnesota and the city of Moorhead. However, even though we are $28 million above what is stated in the JPA that we are responsible for, we have continued to seek funding from the state of Minnesota to continue to contribute above and beyond what is required in the JPA. I would like to also underscore and remind everybody that this is a project. When we were sandbagging in 2009, we were not determining if that's where that sand was going. We were not determining if there were Fargo or North Dakota residents that were assisting in sandbagging on the Minnesota side or vice versa. If there is any component of the project that isn't completed, then we don't have a project. So I think we need to remember it's a metro flood diversion. It's not a North Dakota diversion or a Minnesota diversion. It's a metro flood diversion, and we all are contributing to what was agreed to between our two governors back when the JPA was agreed to in 2016. Thank you, Chair. Dardis.
Thank you. Anyone additional? Keep the comments, please, to the Clay County 37-foot MOU. Mr. Steen.
Thank you. And I haven't been party to this conversation, but I just do have a question for my own clarity. And my memory is not great, but it seems like when we went to 37, John, and help me out here, we had initially we had like 43 million something, and then this 37-foot raise we had another 43 million we're expecting from the state. I mean, but I know it's all mixed in there somewhere, but I'm just curious, can you clarify that for me? Because I truly do not have a good idea what to expect.
Certainly, Director Steen, I'm happy to answer that question. So there are two numbers that coincidentally are very similar in amount, and I believe at the time it was approximately 46 million, give or take some change. There was 46 million that was needed to complete at that time when the financial plan was developed. 46 million needed to complete the in-town Moorhead flood control components. Over time, the state of Minnesota, since that time, has contributed plus or minus about 32 million, and there's about 7 or 8 million left to and these are rough numbers. I'd have to defer to Bob Zimmer on that. There's about 7 or 8 million of in-town flood protection to complete, very similar to Fargo, where there's some projects that are getting buttoned up. The other approximate 46 million was an estimate that was based upon projects, including this, that were outside of the city limits that still needed to be done. And so that included from projects to land acquisition. That did precede the settlement agreement, those numbers. And so kudos to the estimating team that even with the settlement agreement, the estimate is pretty close to what the final numbers ended up being. So it's a good job of estimating, even with the settlement agreement in place. And so there was approximately at the time, 46 million of in-town work for Moorhead and approximately 46 million of out-of-town. And so the Minnesota has continued to chip away on collectively that 80 to 90 million dollars. And that in last session, there was an additional ask for 50 million. My understanding is there'll be additional asks for additional funding for these projects. And I would defer to Commissioner Campbell and the mayor on specific strategy, but that's the concept.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just want some clarity because it's been a while. I was off the board for a couple of years, so I'm trying to get back in, so thank you.
Any additional questions on Clay County 37-foot MOU? Please continue then. The next one.
The second item is part of the mitigation for the project. So you'll recall as part of the settlement agreement and as part of the overall mitigation that was envisioned by the Corps, there was an intent to mitigate impacts to cemeteries within the staging area. And I think there was a general desire by the board also to mitigate impacts to cemeteries. And that was reflected in both the settlement agreement and the PRAM, the Property Rights Acquisition Manual, that was approved and therefore became part of the permit requirements for both the state of Minnesota and the state of North Dakota, that the cemetery protection plan would be implemented, which included this mitigation measure for North Pleasant Cemetery. It involves, and if you look on page 110 and page 111, you can kind of see what the cemetery itself looks like, or the cemetery along with the proposed mitigation, which includes a ring levee. My understanding is the ring levee is 4 to 5 feet tall. It's not a very large ring levee, but nonetheless, it needs to be completed. And so the terms and conditions of this agreement are very similar to our other agreements with other cemeteries. And so this is providing the protection that was covenanted to be provided within the settlement agreement and the PRAM agreement. Happy to answer any legal questions. If there's technical questions, I'm going to defer to the technical team about the structure and size of the cemetery.
Are there any questions on the North Pleasant Cemetery Agreement? Thank you, Mr. Shockley.
Do you have a follow-up on that?
Please, Mr. Steen.
Thank you. And John, just if I could, and it's been a while since I read the Cass County one. Are there any significant differences between the Clay County MOU and the Cass County MOU that we should be aware of?
Cost, the Cass County one is much higher than the Clay County one. There are more road improvements in Cass County that need to be undertaken than in Clay County. The actual underlying terms are very, very similar.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? I'll leave it to the committee if we handle these together, jointly or separately.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to request that they're separate, please.
All right. First item is the Clay County 37-foot MOU. A motion, please.
Move to approve.
Mayor Carlson moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Mayor Mahoney seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Don, would you please call a roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
yes,
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
No.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you. Motion carried. Now we're on item B of number 7 is the North Pleasant Cemetery Agreement. Again, a motion, please.
Motion to, or second.
Commissioner Peterson moves. Mayor Mahoney seconds. We have a motion and a second to approve the North Pleasant Cemetery Agreement. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
yes,
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Thank you, Don. Motion carries. Item number 8 is the Diversion Authority Board Approval Contracting Actions. We call on Mr. Paul Barthol for that. We have items A through D. Please, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Again, before you are 4 different contracting actions. The first is a task order amendment for AE2S Incorporated. They have been working on the lands program and helping manage that. This is an addition to their existing contract for several different reasons. First of all, there's been some additional scope that was added to the lands program for the Cheyenne benching project, and for then also within Christine and Wolverton, we're having to purchase flowage easements in those communities. So that's additional work that they will help manage. And then the other aspect of it, about 2 years ago, we removed about $2.5 million from this contract, anticipating that once we hit eminent domain, a lot of the management and a lot of the work would be done by the legal team. That has not come into fruition. There's still a large amount of work that AE2S is helping out with on the sale of the excess lands, all the letters, all the notifications, those type of things are ongoing. And so we haven't seen the reduction in their fee and their cost as expected. So the task order amendment is for about $1.6 million, and that will take us through 2026, the end of the year there. So any questions for that?
Questions for Paul? Mr. Steen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll ask this question, but so the second bullet under this this agreement here says increase the budget for 2025 and 2026 to accommodate the Christine and Cheyenne projects. You know, I've got to ask, is that increasing the annual budget for each of those or the total budget?
Both. We will need to update the annual budget for 2025 to include this, and then it will be in the 2026 program budget. So it's an overall program, but then we will have to adjust the cash budget, which the draft you'll review later on to include this task order amendment.
Maybe what I should have said was, does this impact the project budget? Is this included in the project budget?
Yes, it is included in the program budget because we reduced their cost a couple of years ago. That money was still available in the program budget, so we felt that we could add this money back in underneath that subtask of the soft costs under the lands committee or the lands line item.
I'd like to ask a question with regard to, you use the word add scope to these projects.
Yes.
From the original negotiated settlements that we had with these folks of what we were going to do in Christine and Wolverton, over time, have they asked for additional scope over and above what the original agreements were?
So there are two different things going on within Christine and Wolverton. As part of the settlement agreement, there's an agreement to fund the development of a levee around both communities and basically provide them flood protection that way. However, the issue comes in is the timing of that. Are they going to be able to get that completed in time for us to operate in 2027? What was decided within the last year is that we would not have enough time to get through the eminent domain process if we had to by 2027 if we didn't move forward with the flowage easements. So we either have to purchase a flowage easement to store water on their property, or they have to have the ring levee in place. Without the ring levee in place, we were at risk for not being able to operate, so the decision was made to go forward with purchasing the flowage easements in these two communities. Prior to that decision, it was not anticipated to purchase the flowage easement. So that's the additional scope, is purchasing flowage easements in areas where we once thought we had protection from a levee. But due to the timing of the construction of that levee, we're not able to count on the levee providing the protection. So the additional scope that I talked about there was adding the flowage easements in Christine and Wolverton.
Do you know what that specific amount is for the flowage easements?
I will have to defer to our Director of Lands on that.
So Mayor, daughters, and members of the committee, the estimated cost for those flowage easements is just over $8 million. And then, of course, we'll have the soft costs associated with the appraisal firms and our land agent. So that's been placed in those task orders The Finance Committee authorized that through our lands acquisition directive back in February. So we've been authorized to move forward with the acquisition of that. And just to add on to what Paul noted, we had a meeting with the Department of Water Resources earlier this year regarding these particular flowage easements. And the determination was made that even with the ring levy, we still need the flowage easements there, and we'll have to ask permission to release the flowage easements once the ring levy is completely constructed. That request needs to go forward to both the Army Corps of Engineers because some of them are in Zone 2, and then some of them are in Zone 3, so that request will go forward to the Department of Water Resources. So the acquisition and release process of this is probably several years long for us. So,
Thank you. Mr. Steen?
Thank you. So Jody, we've talked about this before, but and I was listening to you, but I didn't quite catch, what do you think the cost of the flowage easements might be?
$8 million.
$8 million.
That is correct.
To temporarily have a flowage easement, and then we're just going to give them all back.
Well, I think that's the question that we haven't fully vetted out yet. I mean, that's a question the property owners have presented to us. So if they sign a flowage easement and then they no longer need the flowage easement, will they need to pay the flowage easement back? Now, if you were a property owner and I gave you $100,000 and 10 years later had the ability to come back and say, give me that $100,000 back, would you sign the flowage easement or would you make me take you into eminent domain? And so that's a question that we haven't quite gotten to. I know you brought it up with the Cass County Joint Board. We have had some internal legal discussions, but we haven't come to a conclusion on how those flowage easements would be presented to the property owners yet. So
kind of a follow-up strange question, a little familiar with Zone 1, 2, 3. What zone would this be in?
These are going to be Zones 2, so that's a federal mitigation zone that is controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers, and Zone 3, which is a state-controlled mitigation zone by the Department of Water Resources.
So in a zone, anything less than Zone 1, they can maintain buildings.
You can. It's pretty heavily restricted in Zone 2. We don't have very many property owners who are choosing to build in Zone 2, but we have quite a few in Zones 3 and 4. And so as you go through the city of Christine, we have over 50 parcels and we have over 30 property owners in there. There are, what we currently are estimating is no more than 7 structures would need to be removed. We do have surveyors out there and the appraisers are currently out there because those surveyors need to do the topographic survey to tell us, can we mitigate that structure? So can we wet-proof it so that we don't have to demolish it? That's going to decrease that cost. We do have one parcel that's probably the most concerning to me because they're going to have an access issue. And when there's an access issue to this degree, we typically have to acquire their entire property and remove all the structures. And that's going to be a fairly expensive acquisition during that process. So, but if you think of 56 parcels, I mean, most of what the flowage easement is covering is just beyond what is already in the 100-year flood. So through those drainage wells, they already knew that water came and collected in there. So really what we're acquiring is the ability to store water in an area that has been storing water for quite some time, and then reducing their ability to develop that, like build a garage. We had one woman that brought that up. Well, I've been wanting to build a garage out there for a decade. Well, she hasn't built the garage, but we certainly can advise her on where to build the garage and how much fill she'd have to bring in to build that garage, but she can still build it. The other discussion that we've had internally is, let's say you're within that ring levee, you're in Zone 3, they've completed the ring levee. Can we keep the flowage easement in that place but change the restrictions that are in that ring levee in Zone 3? That is something that we'd have to work with our permitting agencies on.
So thought process here is we intend to build a ring levee, right? That's the intention.
The intention was the city of Christine would build a ring levee.
And all these other flowage easements that we've purchased, it's permanent. It's like they don't go away, correct?
That is correct.
And so, we're pretty sure that this flowage easement will be, will disappear in a number of years after we have the ring dike built, and yet we're still willing to pay as if we're going to keep the flowage easement on this property forever. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's how the flowage easement is currently constructed, and that's the question that needs to be vetted out through legal counsel. And then it's a policy decision by the board eventually once we vet through all of the legal, pros and cons. I mean, really, when we bring that forward, we need to bring forward the consequences that could happen if we don't do something. We need to bring forward the pros if we do something. And I'm not in that position today to be able to answer all that. But we haven't authorized that. The Cass County Joint Board has not seen those appraisals yet, and it's not anticipated that you'll see those appraisals until at least, I know the Cheyenne benching ones are coming forward. We're scheduled in November, but these ones, then once we get those and bring those forward, at that time, we'll need to have a decision in place before we make an offer to those property owners with that flowage easement.
So these will be permanent flowage easements. We will purchase them just like any other flowage easement. We're not doing anything called temporary flowage easements or anything like that. That will give the authority the right to store water if for some reason the ring levees are never constructed, okay? So we're purchasing it much as we would any other flowage easement, so it would be a permanent until the authority gives up the right to store water once they see that the ring levee is complete and certified.
So it's permanent until it's not. That's what you're telling me.
It's permanent until
it's
you
not.
give it up.
Well, until the Corps authorizes us to release it, and the Department of Water Resources would have to authorize us to release it.
Yeah.
And I anticipate that, I mean, at the end of the day, I would anticipate more of these will come. I mean, if you're on we're purchasing 30,000 acres of flowage easements, and if we're on the peripheral of something and it's in zone 2 or 3, and you have a developer out there who's going to come in and wants to develop a community out there, and we've purchased, say, $700,000 worth of flowage easements, and all they have to do is bring in extra fill so they can build a development, there is the potential that these asks are going to come back. The difference here is, unless we purchase these flowage easements, we will not get permitted to operate because we will not have all the property rights necessary to operate in 2027. Currently, they have not started the process of acquiring the necessary property rights to do their ring levy. So when I back through that schedule, what that tells me is they're not going to be able to get, if there's any eminent domain action, they will not be able to get through that eminent domain action in time to build that ring levy. My understanding, not a construction expert, is it takes 2 years to build the ring levy. So if they had all of it acquired now, you're looking at 2026. Well, they haven't started that process yet. So if they start it and complete that, and let's say they even go through a quick take eminent domain process and they start that next May, that's a 1-year process. You're talking about May of 2026. Mm-hmm. At a minimum, they'd have that ring levee built in May of 2028. And if we're still on schedule to be operating in March of 2027, I kind of have to merge some of that together. And so looking at the risk of not being able to operate the project versus the $8 million is what's on the table.
Part. But back to your first analogy, if we purchased a flowage easement, now we have a developer who wants to develop, we're just not going to give that back. There's a cost to that, correct?
And that's a policy decision that the board would need to make at that time.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Mr. Bartel, you used the term, if they choose to build the ring dike.
I misspoke that. They have chosen if they are able to finish the ring levee. And so they are moving forward. They are working on the 2 ring levees. It's just the timing of it, and then whether or not they'll be able to finish it, secure the land, get the property buy-offs. We've had challenges within our project. We're assuming that they're going to see the same challenges as they go to purchase the property out there. So it's not whether they choose to. My apologies for that misstatement.
Thank you.
It's whether they are able to finish it.
Okay, one more question, if I may. So in our original agreement with these ring dikes around these communities, and you mentioned that there's a change in the scope of work, have the total acreage that was going to be initially in the ring dikes, has that changed at all to what they now want?
Obviously,
then there's more material, more labor, if they expanded from the original discussions.
Christine has. The original discussion that we had was a certain dimension, and then they've now expanded that out to encompass some other properties in the area. One of the things that we have asked the city of Christine to check with the permitting agencies to see if they would actually be permittable at that size. And so they're in the process of doing that due diligence to do that. But Christine has expanded from the original approved alignment that the original cost estimate was based off of.
Significantly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me answer for you. I can hear him sighing.
Yeah, it's quite a bit larger than it was before.
So how does that work in with our agreements that we have and all the process that we've already been through?
Well, the agreement
Are
states.
are they going to pay for some of that expense of that expansion?
So, a great question, Chair. You'll recall back to the settlement agreement, specific to the city of Christine, the authority agreed in the settlement agreement to allow for a larger ring levy within the settlement agreement. And so the authority agreed to that. During the initial discussions with the city of Christine, it was a smaller one, but they chose to use all of their legal rights under the settlement agreement and go with the larger one. And so it is, fortunately or unfortunately, it is part of the settlement agreement, and legally they can go to the larger diameter. The staff tried mightily to shrink that down, and they have worked to shrink it down to more reasonable, but they're still using their full rights under the settlement agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. I do recall all of those conversations and all that discussion. The point is that now we're putting real dollars to it. And that's the difference between a discussion in theory that they were going to expand this, and now the real dollars are coming back to the Finance Committee and back to the Diversion Authority. That's the point I was trying to make. So thank you for your history lesson and your guidance on this.
Any more questions, Mr. Steen? Okay, Commissioner Peterson.
I'll just suggest, Jody, we'll see you at Joint Water Board.
In the morning. I look forward to it.
Mr. Chair, a question?
Please.
Much more mundane. Is this an hourly? I've looked through here a number of times, and I can't for the life of me find. Is this hourly, the 1.6 million? Or
Is this hourly? Yes. And so this is with going back to the A2S task order. Just so you know.
I said much more mundane.
Yes, thank you for that. You know, I appreciate the due diligence as we look at some of our task orders, and just so you know, most of them, you know, when it relates to lands, they kind of run through my desk. And so I did ask Eric to pull me some numbers. And 2 years ago, their monthly burn rate was about $40,000. Right now, their monthly burn rate's about $35,000. And a year from now, we should be pulling back to 25,000. Tracking anything lands related outside of A2S, our land firms were burning about $200,000 a month. We have them down to about $75,000 a month. Then our appraisal firms were at about $75,000 a month. We have them down to $25,000, and our legal expenses are actually tracking up. I was budgeting about $200,000 a month, and next year I've asked for about $300,000 a month, and that's related to all the eminent domain cases that are coming up. So while this one looks like it is kind of trending upwards, our burn rate continues to go down month over month, and so that is something that I do track pretty closely. So they do submit a detailed expense report to me. You can ask Eric at least every month. I kick it back to him with questions about certain things and trying to track that just to make sure that this continues to trend downwards and we don't see these spikes kind of going back up. So
Thank you. Keep kicking it back with questions.
You're welcome.
As I look at Eric.
Anything additional, or anybody have any questions on the E2S Task Order 1, Amendment 14? Please continue.
Okay, the second is a new service agreement with JT Lawn Services and Landscaping. JT Lawn Services, if you recall, has been doing mowing for the authority on properties that have been acquired through the negotiations and through closing on properties, so farmsteads, those type of things that need maintenance. This is for to perform snow removal, basically on an on-call basis during the winter at these farmsteads until the properties are removed. We still have to maintain the buildings. We still have to make sure the furnace is on, furnace is running. We have to do monthly check or bi-weekly checks. So twice a month we're out there to ensure that the resources are available. JT will provide us the snow removal to allow us to access to these facilities. So this is just, like I said, an on-call type services for $10,000 to start with. Any questions?
Thank you.
All right. The next one is Task Order 7, Amendment 0. This is for Minn Kota Power. They own the and operate the substation just north of Oxbow as part of their MURA, Memorandum of Utility Relocation Agreement, Municipal Utility Relocation Agreement, that we have an agreement with Minn Kota Power to reimburse them for the work to relocate the substation. This is for the materials to relocate that substation, since some have a longer lead time than others. And so this $913,000 task order is to allow to reimburse Minn Kota for the structures, breakers, control enclosures, all of the hardware that they'll need to relocate the substation.
Questions on this item? Please continue.
Okay, and the last one is Task Order 24, Amendment 0. This is part of our Work Package 37C, which is our property mitigation work package. We have a site that we need to remove the home and also remove and clean up the adjacent property, adjacent parcels with that property. And we've bundled 3 lots together just because of their close proximity. And per the resolution, it's over $200,000, so that has been required to come before the board for Finance Committee and board for your approval. The engineer's estimate on this was a little bit below the lowest bid price. IBI was the low bid at $296. Our engineer's estimate was about $252. Looking at the differences, first and foremost, we did not see a savings that we typically see for the salvage of the house, and so we're assuming that there's no buyer for this house, and so that it's basically the full demo price. The other thing that we noted that were on the adjacent lots, though the cleanup of those adjacent lots were higher than anticipated, slightly higher than anticipated, mostly because there's a certain risk if the contractor doesn't know what's out there, if they run into something that was dumped in the woods or who knows what's out there, it's to cover that risk. So I feel comfortable recommending approval of this bid of $296,000.
Thank you. Questions on this item? Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Chair, thank you. We only had 2 bidders on this?
Yes. As part of our 38C, we have master agreement for construction services. So we have 4 firms that we send all of these to. We only received responses back from 2.
Okay, what can we do to compel is the wrong word. What can we do to get more? I know, and the reason I ask is because
Right.
there are people in this region that are looking for, it seems like there's this massive teeter-totter swing where you've got either no work or you've got more work than you can even imagine. So I know there's people out there that are more hungry than maybe IBI. I don't know about Schmidt, but IBI is very comfortable in their workload seemingly every year since I've been an adult. So what can you do, if anything, to get more people involved, or the potential to have more people involved in giving us numbers? Especially on projects that are, this is pretty basic stuff, right? It's not building a bridge or an aqueduct. It's makes this thing go away and make the site look okay when you're done.
Right. The way that we've configured this is because the number that we've turned over, it's a task order and a task order amendments rather than a full contract.
Yep.
And so to streamline the bidding process, we've done it this way. I think we need to go out and solicit some more firms if there's a desire to do that, and solicit more firms to get on our short list of those 4. So rather than just sending it to those 4, we have a couple others under that master agreement. And we can do that. I think, because we're only seeing 2 bidders on this, I think that would be prudent to do that. And especially with the workload that's coming up, we have 5 more this fall, probably another 10 after the first of the year, and somewhere in the next year, or well, before 2027, we have approximately 100 of these properties that we'll need to mitigate. So I think what we can do is go out and see if recontact, because there were several firms that we initially contacted for this that had no interest in the master contract. However, times may have changed, so we'll re-engage with them and see if we can get additional folks on under our master contract.
I would appreciate if you did. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any additional questions on item D? These are all actionable items. We can take them one at a time or all together, whatever's your pleasure.
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion to approve all of them at the same time.
Commissioner Pipcorn moves to approve items A through D on item number 8. Is there a second? Mr. Steen seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve items A through D on section 8 of the board approval contracting actions. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dartis.
Yes.
Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Everyone.
Thank you, Don. The motion passes. We're on item 9, other business. The first order of business is the Cass County HR MOU amendment. Calling Mr. John Shockley for a presentation. It's on page 126 of the packet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Finance Committee. Before you have an MOU that is amending the prior MOU with Cass County regarding HR policies and procedures. Previously, the authority had adopted, taken the position that it was going to adopt its own personnel policy manual and had just reserved to the county benefits administration along with pay administration. And subsequently, the board has given us direction at a staff level that it wanted to migrate back to following the HR policies of Cass County specifically. So the amendment affects that by having the authority specifically adopt all of the HR policies of Cass County. There was discussion, which would be a wholesale adoption of their HR policy manual, their benefits administration, all of the policies and procedures for HR that are adopted by the county. There was discussion at the planning committee regarding a specific item. The question, so I'll set the table with regard to what the question was. The question that was posed at the planning committee was, what would the COLA adjustment for diversion authorities employees be under this amendment? My response was quite simple, that if you adopt this amendment as drafted, it would be the COLA policy that is implemented by Cass County. There was discussion at the planning committee meeting, and I believe, and I would defer to the planning committee members, the discussion centered around how the COLA for diversion authority employees should be calculated. As part of setting the table, if there is a decision to deviate from what Cass County uses, I can amend the draft amendment very easily and add that provision in. So what's in front of you does not have a specific amendment regarding what the COLA should be. I believe, and my recollection is, that the planning committee's recommendation would be to have a blended COLA that is similar to the triple, and I'm going to get this name wrong, the triple RDC, that would be the emergency center, and have a blended COLA that matches that. The board and the finance committee can certainly weigh into what you want that policy to be. From a legal standpoint, all those options are perfectly legal, and so this is truly a policy matter. If you want to direct one policy or another, I can insert that into the amendment. So stand for any questions regarding the...
Mr. Steen, turn your mic on.
Thank you. Say, John, you can, how can I say this? That item obviously had a limited discussion at planning, and we could always, at the board level, adopt a policy before all this becomes effective, because currently there's no big raises. I mean, there's nothing happening really in the short term. And so this amendment could happen at any time once the diversion, the authority board had a chance to contemplate and look at the options and actually get all the information available. One would be I think we're having a study done, aren't we, for a market study done for all the employees for the diversion authority. I think it'd be nice to have everything together before we start making decisions on what would go, how you'd apply this going forward. So, I like what you've done here in your proposal, where if the board of authority would like to adopt a different formula, that can be amended to reflect that. And I think that's appropriate at some point in time.
Yeah, great question. You could, as a board, decide to adopt the HR MOU amendment as proposed, which would include how Cass County handles it, and then come back later after some additional study and amend it to a different way to adjust the COLA if that's what you wanted.
Right. Yep.
As a board.
Any additional questions? Again, this is an actionable item. It's been brought forward by our co-executive directors, Mr. Redlinger and Mr. Wilson, and the Mayor Carlson, our chairman. Please, Mayor Carlson.
Thank you, Chair Dardis. I believe that just for information for the Finance Committee, the motion at the Planning Committee was to approve a COLA that was, and I don't think that this specifies that, correct?
Correct. It does not.
So to ensure that there is consistency between motions being made by our Planning Committee and anything that is being motioned and approved by Finance, I think that I would propose to amend that this memorandum adopt the COLA motion that was made at the Planning Committee, and then this will be going to the full board where that determination could be made as a final decision until such time that our comp study is completed. So I would move to approve with that amendment to this memorandum.
Mayor Carlson moves to amend the memorandum as written. Is there a second? Is there a second? Dies to a lack of a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Steen?
I would move to approve the proposed, when you say amendment, perhaps, Mayor Carlson, are you proposing to adopt the county policies as written? Is that the proposal? I was a little confused with you started winding in the planning committee and whatnot. If you're proposing, if the amendment, John, maybe help me out here, is the amendment to approve the policy as currently presented?
So, without putting words in Mayor Carlson's name, I will try to summarize, I think, what she was trying to say based
for
on.
hers died for lack of a second. So I want to know what this amendment as written currently proposes. That's what I really want to know.
Okay, as written, it proposes to adopt all of Cass County's policies, which is inclusive of whatever their COLA adjustment is. I believe what the discussion at the planning committee was in the
That's all I need.
incongruence.
That's all I need, John. But thanks.
Okay.
So I would recommend approve the proposed First Amendment to the MOU between Cass County and the MFDA for HR services.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Mayor Mahoney?
Confusion comes at the dispatch center. We take the COLA for all 4 entities or 5 entities and would blend it to get a COLA. The difficulty we've gotten into with the Diversion Authority members is, are you at market or not? So for instance, Clay County is doing this year a market increase of 3% and a COLA of 3%. So if you are at market, if the county employees we're at market, then they're at market. They don't have a market plus a 3%. So the difficulty comes the same as West Fargo. Are you at market with your employees or not? And we used to do a competitive market adjustment at one time to try to clear that up, that you're trying to keep with market, and that was the difficulty. The difficulty, it seemed, with the Diversion Authority being different or having a different element, the market salaries got out of hand. And that's, I think, what you're trying to reflect is you're going to go back to the county, follow the county rules, basically. Is that correct?
Mr. Steen?
If I may, I think I understand, Mayor, what you're suggesting. And all I'm saying is, I think the approach requires more time before you decide if there's a different way to do it. And what I'm saying, I'm not precluding doing that. I'm saying it would be better to take time to look at the market study, find out where it falls. Does anything even fit within the county's step system? These are all questions that the board should know before they say, hey, we're going to adopt this system. And right now, it's the COLA system. It's easy. And that's why I asked John, can this be changed at a future date, even in the short term? And I think the answer was yes, it could. So that's why I just want to get this, so we get the rest of this on the table. We can address the whole COLA thing at a future meeting and get, once we have all the information together. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Commissioner Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's my intention with my second as well. I think you may get to what Mayor Carlson in the end suggesting initially, but let's go through the methodology in getting there. I think now's the time to pass it, get everything in place, and then figure out what former Commissioner Steen, Director Steen said is, I think, is spot on in that we don't have anything impactful happening in the next handful of months. This is going to be a next year decision. So we've got all of that time. The Diversion Authority has all that time to figure out what you want to do, but this puts in place immediately HR policies, gets resolution to that, and then we can discuss what's next. Thank you.
Mayor Carlson?
Thank you, Chair Dardis. So I'm just curious, Attorney Shockley, if we have a motion that is coming from the finance that states that a COLA would be whatever is reflected in the Cass County policy, so that comes from finance, and then from planning committee, there was a motion made that the COLA would be adding them all up and dividing them. So we would be having two conflicting motions or agenda items that would be coming to the board. So how would you suggest that, is this discussed first at the board meeting, and then the second one is addressed, and if that is moved and approved by the full board, then we have to come back and then do an adjust. I mean, that's where I think some of my confusion lies.
It's a great question, Mayor Carlson. My recommendation would be just to place this on the agenda and to state the two different recommendations from the executive or the planning committee and then the one from the finance committee, and it will be up to the board to resolve which recommendation it wants to go with, because this is truly a policy discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Mr. Steen?
That was exactly what I was going to respond to. Just say, here's recommendations. So we're not making policy. We're making a recommendation. You have two different committees, two different recommendations. That's happened before. So.
Again, we have a motion and a second on the floor that we would, that the Diversion Authority employees would be the same COLA determined by Cass County HR
The
policy.
recommendations actually adopt the Cass County HR policies.
Correct. Is there any more discussion, any more questions? Mayor Mahoney.
Michael, I thought you and Robert now have all the salaries, or is that study not done?
That study is going to be underway shortly. We actually meet on Friday with some of the principals from the authority board to determine who we are going to work with. So that's on Friday. We're going to make a selection and come back to the board with that recommendation.
Any more discussion on this item only?
And per this motion and what we're going to do, President's employees will be at the same salary. They're not going to be pulled back to a grade 7 step whatever. They stay at the same salary until the study's done.
This only deals with the COLA as it's.
No, this deals with the policies, not the COLA. Just adopt the policies. That's all we're saying. The COLA is part of the policies, so what we can do is address the compensation. What I'm getting at, the whole thing is trying to address the compensation after we've adopted the policy, because there's no compensation set yet for any, take that back. The authority employees all have a set compensation already. I don't anticipate, I'm part of the county anymore, but I don't anticipate there'd be any suggestion whatsoever that they would pull back. It's the policies and, yeah.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes, and thank you for the
Dean?
clarification.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Peppercorn.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Next order of business under item 9, other business, is B, the first draft of the 2025 cash budget. Call on Paul Barthol. It's on page 232 of the packet. Paul, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. It's my pleasure to present to you our first draft of the 2025 cash budget. Some of the highlights or things to note. If you note, under the milestone payments to the developer, per the current schedule that we have, we're anticipating about $232 million in milestone payments to be paid to the developer in 2025. And then also, if you look down at the lands, we've just discussed the balance remaining of 11.9 million. Again, depending on whether or not that closes out the end of this year. Assuming everything is closed with that, we expect to spend about another $49 million in lands and closing those out next year. And that does include the Cheyenne diversion that we've talked about earlier. Also included in this is our typical non-construction costs for engineering and design work, finalizing that through various other projects within the authority, including the Cheyenne diversion, the Cheyenne benching project, several of these cemetery projects. They don't have the staff to do the work themselves, so the authority is doing that work and will reimburse with that. And then you also have the program management and legal costs that are consistent and actually declining from what we've seen previously. Then we also have our third-party MOU. This is also the utilities. So we see about another $8 million in utility costs next year. Work package 47, contracted utility relocations. That $5.6 million is for the Cass Rural Water Plant adjacent to County Road 16, providing them with a ring levee to allow their reservoir to remain in place per the MOU that was signed with them. And then we have $35.5 million with some of the township and the city MOU agreements that we have. This is the Wolverton, Christine, Georgetown levies that are included in there. This is work that is all within the MOUs in that sense. And then we have our typical financing fees that we pay out on an annual basis. And then some of the other refunding and interest loan that we have through there. If you continue to scroll down our funding sources, we have, again, our sales tax, county sales tax. The $70 million is our legacy. That is what is anticipated if we spend everything that we anticipate this year. So that basically means of the $435 million in legacy bonds, we have spent everything but the $70 million. So we anticipate depleting that account by mid-year next year. Also included in there, if you notice, there's the WIFIA draws of $232 million. So the WIFIA is only eligible for the stormwater infrastructure, which is mainly the channel. And so the 232 is in direct correlation with the milestone payments that are listed under the P3. And then we also have some investment income of about $7.5 million. This is consistent with what we've seen with the investments and the interest that's on our current cash balance. So we're looking at an increase from $216 million this year to over $400 million. But the majority, like I said, is $232 million payments to the developer. Are there any questions?
Any questions of Paul? Commissioner Peterson.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I know you've told us this in the past. I just can't remember. Rate of growth on sales tax. What did you put as an additive figure on that from this year to next?
We've been typically utilizing about 3% growth on that.
Okay.
So
for some reason,
working with the city and working with the county as you know what we've seen in previous years. Try to be conservative. Don't want to overestimate our position with cash incoming. Would rather be conservative that way.
So 3%.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Paul? In discussions with him, we're probably going to see about several revisions before the end of the year. Obviously, when Mrs. Smith was at the microphone, she had indicated that she's got a number of large settlements that she's working on and that type of thing. There's $11 million left in her budget. And so there are possibilities that we are going to see some changes. So again, as stated, this is a preliminary budget, and we will probably have 2 to 3 more iterations before we have a final budget for 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I anticipate the final budget will probably be before the Finance Committee and then board in our December meeting. That will give us a better idea of what our spend is this year on lands, and then also any of the, Peggy, if you could scroll up just to the P3 again. If you notice, there's still 33 million in the milestone payments. We still anticipate there's a possibility of getting those yet this year. If not, those will get pushed into 2025. So we'll have a better idea of that in December. So, thank you.
Thank you. This is an actionable item, and again, I want to stress that this is the first draft of the 2025 cash budget.
Motion to accept.
Thank you, Commissioner Peterson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mayor Mahoney seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the first draft of the 2025 cash budget as presented. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Please,
One question.
Commissioner.
So, as this is the first draft, what are we actually doing here? Just acknowledging
It's putting the line items as to
I mean, we're not
where we see.
recommending
No,
approval
no.
or anything like that. We're just saying, hey, we reviewed it and it looks good for now.
Yeah.
And it's good working knowledge for all of us because
The
we're seeing the revenue forecasts. You're seeing where our expenses are year to date for 2024
good
and what we have remaining.
The biggest thing is with especially the revenues, is there the understanding by the committee that we would utilize WIFIA loans. This is the first time we've done that, so I would like the feedback from the committee on that. And then the levels of effort that you see in it, just wanted the feedback from that. But the biggest thing was more so for awareness and understanding and direction on the WIFIA loan.
Anything additional? Questions? Don, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Everyone.
Thank you, Don. Does any member of the Finance Committee have anything that they'd like to bring forward at this time?
I'd like to report you're awesome, Mr. Chair.
That's a first. Is there any member or staff members, anything that you'd like to bring forward? All right, thank you all. Our next meeting is October 23rd, 2024. We stand adjourned. Thank you.